Today's video is going to be on Pop Report, and I cannot think of a better card to use for an example for Pop Report than the first edition Magic Ruler Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. It's a secret rare card from the third set from Yu-Gi-Oh! And first I'm going to go over the card itself and why it's valuable and why it's collectible and whatnot, and then go over Pop Report. And what the video is going to emphasize on for Pop Report is how it can be an effective tool as far as collecting and knowing collecting values, but can very often be overhyped or overemphasized for card values and kind of lead to this bubble situation, which really happened with the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon card here that I'm holding. And I'll give multiple examples of that ballooning process as I go throughout the video. So to start out, this is a vintage Yu-Gi-Oh card that's from Magic Ruler, the third Yu-Gi-Oh set. It came out of these Magic Ruler 24-pack boxes, and not the 36-pack box. The 36-pack box had the Serpent Knight Dragon. So it's a vintage Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's tied to Pegasus and Kaiba both. Tied to Pegasus for being a Toon card, so obviously any Toon card is very, any of the vintage Toon cards, I should say, are very popular, very collectible. Anything Blue Eyes, definitely collectible. It's pretty much the most collectible card in Yu-Gi-Oh! As far as vintage value and collecting value. And then being tied to both Pegasus and Kaiba, the first real main villain of the show, one of the biggest main characters in the show with Kaiba, who's throughout the entire original series and like this anti-hero to an extent. It's connected to both of the two biggest characters in the anime, so it's a very popular anime card for that reason. As far as a playable card, not very. The Toon cards just weren't that great. I mean, you could play around with them, they're fun, but Blue Eyes Toon Dragon, definitely not like a good card. I don't even think modern Toon decks use Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. But to go over, when PSA grading for Yu-Gi-Oh cards first started to become a thing, most Yu-Gi-Oh cards were in very low population because it wasn't a huge thing at the time. It was something that few people were doing, and so on the market there was very few cards available. So when this card started getting graded, it was in a very low population report, like in the single digits, maybe a little bit in like the 15-ish area, the mid-teens, low teens, but not a very high population, not a lot of these on the market. And so the value of this card was deemed to be around $500, easy going. When there was only, a couple available, you could go on eBay and maybe one or two for sale. And people really wanted this card because, it is the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. It's the Blue Eyes variant, it's the Kaiba variant, or the Pegasus Toon variant. There's just a lot to like about this card. And so, also at that time, when people are paying $500 for this card graded in as a PSA 10 in first edition, these first edition Magic Ruler boxes weren't that valuable. They were going for, $200, $250 at the most. And so it kind of became apparent that, hey, I can buy one of these boxes, open it up, possibly have like a 50-50 shot at getting a secret rare pulled Blue Eyes Toon Dragon out of it, and getting it graded as a PSA 10. And these Magic Ruler boxes had very few issues with them. This is probably like one of the easiest sets to grade as far as Yu-Gi-Oh cards go. Yu-Gi-Oh cards, they did not have the huge issues that Pokemon Wizards of the Coast cards did. Upper Deck just did a much better job of printing their trading cards. The quality was just so much higher than what Wizards of the Coast was producing at the time. You didn't get scratches all over the hollow foil like Wizards of the Coast did. You didn't get these nicks in the corners of the cards where the machine cuts like Wizards of the Coast did either. Usually your biggest issue with the Upper Deck Yu-Gi-Oh cards is like centering, and Magic Ruler didn't have any centering issues at all. Later on, when Upper Deck started doing like the Ultimate Rares printing, they had issues with those, but as far as just like the regular hollows, pretty much it's just the centering that's going to kill you most of the time. So, opening up these boxes and getting the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon and pulling it and then sending off to PSA, it was very likely you're going to get that Gem Mint 10 grade that everybody wants. And so what ended up happening also at this time was that a bunch of these boxes from one individual seller hit the market, and he basically dumped them off, just a ton of them, and got them out cheap, or pretty cheaply, just collecting the money from, basically, like, he probably bought them really cheap, or had them around, or just found them, and just dumped them and got his profit and was good with that. And so people obviously bought these for cheap, opened them up, got the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon pulls on some of them, sent them in, and then the population on this card for PSA 10 just went up high, it skyrocketed. And so, this card went from being, a $500 card at low population to jumping up to what is now a population of 62 or 64, something like that. I think it's 62 when I last checked. And the more of these that got graded, the more the market got flooded with these cards. And so no longer were buyers forced into buying this card for like that $500 price tag that, just two sellers were having it at. Now sellers were now like putting on the eBay or out in the market and saying, hey, instead of $500, I'll sell mine for $400. I only bought this box for $200. I'll still make a good profit off of that. And then, sellers had to keep undercutting each other, try to move their product. And then the price of this card just dropped. I bought this card at $150 so this is a card that was once valued at $500 that dropped all the way down to $150. It's still first edition. It's Magic Ruler. It's PSA 10. It is the card that was once $500 that I and many other people picked up at $150, $200 easy for a while there. And then as that value dropped, it finally got to a point where people were just like, yeah, I can pick that up and, I think that's a good value. And then the market dried out again. And now you only have a couple on the market again. And, I said, hey, the population report's up to 62. That seems kind of like a lot compared to most other Yu-Gi-Oh cards as far as grading populations. But now the market is dried out because people have bought up what they wanted, and now the price is starting to rise back up again. So price now, what used to be 150 is now at $250, $300 range. And so that 64 or 62 pop report for this card in PSA 10, it doesn't mean much really, because the fact is that no matter what, this card in the PSA 10 is never going to meet the demand of the amount of collectors that will want to have this card. So the supply of this card as a PSA 10, it's never going to meet the demand is basically what I'm saying. Collectors are always going to want this card. It's such an iconic card. It's such a well-known, well-demanded, well-wanted card that the population's never going to meet demand. And so to give another example of, the population of this card compared to like another population of another well-known, highly valuable Yu-Gi-Oh card, I'll use like the DDS Blue Eyes White Dragon. Obviously a really high value card. At PSA 10, it's around $1,000 right now. The pop report on that card is 57. So you're talking about a difference of 5 between this card and the DDS Blue Eyes White Dragon. And the DDS Blue Eyes White Dragon has not seen any drop in value whatsoever. It is sitting strong at $1,000 or more. And it has not seen any drop, any decline, any falter in value at all. It has stayed strong. And so that's a really good example of how population reports can be really overhyped. It could also be that this card just got hit hard on value because of how many hit the market all at once at the same time, whereas the DDS Blue Eyes, it wasn't that case. It just kind of steadily increased in population report or in pop and available on the market, whereas the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon just had a huge increase on the amount that were available and the choices that were available to buyers, and that just kind of hurt its value. To give another example of something that's similar that's going on right now that happened with the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon and the Magic Ruler boxes is right now there's an individual on eBay who has been selling a ton of the 24-pack first edition Pharaohs Servant boxes, which is obviously the box that has the first edition Jinzo in it, another highly iconic, highly valuable, highly desired Yu-Gi-Oh card. He's so far probably sold at least 20 boxes or so. He has another case for sale, so that's another 12 boxes, and he has probably another 4 first edition 24-pack boxes listed on eBay currently right now for auction. And so who knows how many this guy has that he's selling. He's been kind of just updating once in a while, putting a new one on to go in for auction, which is probably the smartest way for him to do it instead of trying to sell off so many at once. And so he's been selling those just periodically. And the fact of the matter is that you could have a similar situation where people are going to buy those boxes, open them up, half of them are going to have, Jinzo cards in them. they're going to go get graded. It's not as likely to get those cards as PSA 10 like every Jinzo, because Pharaoh's Servant does have centering issues, so not every Jinzo out of those boxes is going to get a PSA 10. But even so, if you do see like a high increase in the pop report, is realistically Jinzo going to go from its current value of around $500, $600 right now? I think it's about $500 right now, to $150 like Blue Eyes Toon Dragon did. Highly unlikely. Jinzo is just too strong, too highly valued of a card, and it was just too good back in the day. So people remember it. People know how good Jinzo was and how rare it is to get it as a secret rare, and how hard it can be because of its centering issue. So even if the Jinzo pop report goes to 70 as a PSA 10, I highly doubt that card is just going to take such a huge drop as the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon did. And what you see really with the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon is kind of an overhype on pop, both when it was at a low population of it being valued at $500, where it's kind of hard to say that Blue Eyes Toon Dragon is a $500 card. When it was at a population of 5 or so, when you could pick up, first edition PSA 10 LOB cards for less than $500 at that time. And then it's also hard to say that, it really would drop all the way down to just $150 when, there was other cards that were just ultra rares from like Magic Ruler that were more valuable than that. So what you can see is like an overreaction to pop report with the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. And that's why I think the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon is a really good example of how pop report can be overhyped and overemphasized. It can be a very useful tool for especially for set cards when there's so many readily available. When you look at Pokemon, the set cards are much more difficult to grade as PSA 10s a lot of times, so they can be overvalued. Even if they are mass-produced, because they're just so hard to get as PSA 10s, because the printing quality by Wizards, of course, was so poor. You can take, for example, like the Dark Persian card, first edition Dark Persian from Gym Challenge or Gym Heroes, one of those two. The PSA 10 pop report for that card was in the single digits, was like 5 or 6 for the longest of times. And then the PSA 9 pop report was in the 90s or the hundreds. And it was just, the low hundreds. It was ridiculous how many 9s there were compared to 10s, because it was just such a difficult card to get a Gem Mint 10 grade. It was almost impossible. It had a lot to do with the hollow foil on it and how susceptible, or how easy it was to get scratches on that. And so that's a situation where, yes, the pop report is actually directly affecting the value of the card. The only reason why the Dark Persian, first edition Dark Persian card was in like the $800 range for a while there, and to the $1,000 range right now, I think even still, is because it's basically impossible to get it as a PSA 10. And so because of that, it is directly affected by its pop report. But whereas most Yu-Gi-Oh set cards that don't have that issue, they're not going to be just solely valued by their pop report. The card itself is going to be what determines the value for the card, and not the pop report. And so that's just all I have for today. It's kind of my own kind of little rant, I guess, on pop report and how people can overemphasize it so much. See sellers on eBay always listing like, oh, low pop on this card, it's so valuable. Well, not really. Just give it more time and more people are going to grade that card, and it'll go from single digit pop to being a pop of 20, and now your low pop card is no longer $300 over market value of what it should be. But that's all I have for today, and as always, thank you for watching.